Good evening, everybody. This is Big Bill coming to you live from YouTube Model Builders Railroad. Tonight's show is Who's Big Bill Talking to Tonight? And tonight's the 26th of June. It's 9:01 p.m. And this is the second? I think this is the second installment of Who's Big Bill Talking to. Yeah, it is. So tonight's guests are Larry Ryan,
hello,
New Hampshire, and Chris Rood. Larry, I met Larry up in Amherst, Springfield, Massachusetts in January, and Larry was one of the clinicians who was giving a talk on third rail, and I was one of the guys that took his. In fact, I was the only guy that took his class, the clinic, and it was a good thing. And it wasn't that Larry's topic wasn't interesting. I thought it was very interesting. It was the fact that our good friend Andy Crawford was doing right at the same exact time an electronics thing, which was totally over my head, and so I decided to go to Larry's clinic, and I was glad that I did because it was very informative, And I approached him afterwards, and I kind of begged him. I said, "Please, Larry, please come on." I said, "All right, take it easy, calm down." We got a good friend, Chris Rood, who just congratulations on moving into your new home, Chris.
good evening, gentlemen, and thank you.
And all you guys know Chris. Chris is part of the Model Builders Nightly Chat after shows, stuff like that. So tonight's show, and the reason why we asked these gentlemen on was we've never had the opportunity to do anything to talk about or to show off their toys. Is Larry does third rail, and Chris Rood does O-scale. Now, gentlemen, I'm an HO guy, and I remember my O-scale trains as a kid. When I was a kid, that was the thing my father put around the tree. I had a cousin. I still have a cousin, Chris O'Shea, who has him and his dad did this big Lionel thing, O-scale, and they ran it up in the attic of their house, and and that was my introduction, but I never really got into it. So you guys got to explain to me, Larry, if you would, what is third rail?
Third rail, three rail. It's actually three rail. Anyway, three rail is started in way back, and basically the middle rail is the hot rail, and the two outside rails are your common rail, a return. It's all ran on AC power. And it's over 100 years old, at least.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it started in 1900, 1901, I think.
And was and the history behind it was Lionel or
So Lionel Joshua started his business with department stores. Department stores wanted something to attract the customers, and what he did was he created these trains with, and believe it or not, they were battery powered back then. And he put a train set in the window just to attract the people into their stores, and that's how he started.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Len.
Oh, anyway, so he started with that. That actually took off. People are asking about the trains, and he started making electric trains, and then in order to keep people or keep the kids interested in the trains, he went ahead and made accessories and that sort of thing, and that's how you get the milk car and the cattle car and coal cars and dump cars and things like that. So.
And Chris, how did you get? Now you do. Now, is it the same thing?
Yes. Yes. So I also do 3-rail O scale. Okay. So unlike HO, like HO, more predominantly everything's to scale. A lot more guys in HO do more fine scale or more detailed stuff. Where in the 3-rail O scale world, there's different dominancies. There's the O scale guys like me and Larry. There's the toy train guys who do a lot of the post-war Lionel stuff. That was very popular from about 1949 to about 1970. And in 1970 became the modern era for Lionel, where we started seeing them coming out with more detailed models, that kind of thing. And then you have the tinplate guys that are, tinplate was basically like Larry was talking about, where in the early 1900s, Joshua Lionel came out with the trains. That was tinplate. I have a variation of all three. I have tinplate from the original tinplate. They still make tinplate to this day in O scale because guys still collect it. I also have post-war stuff, but predominantly my collection anymore is modern O scale equipment. It's scale. It's command controlled. You got the synchronized chuff like you do on DCC. You have all that stuff. Even some more. And there are some downsides to being a 3-rail O scaler in terms of couplers, because your coupler gaps aren't the same spacing as it would be in the real world. Some people get bent out of shape when it's not prototypical, which is an easy fix anymore because a lot of the manufacturers now have started to put mounting pads or mounting brackets on the cars, so you can go to KD couplers to do scale couplers. There's proprietary command control if you're in command control world. So Lionel has their own command system. MTH has their own command system. Lionel is now non-proprietary, meaning that I'm a third-party developer for Lionel. I could develop my own software for them and put it out and sell it if I wanted to. I'm a partner just to play around with it. So like Atlas, when you buy an Atlas O engine in 3-rail, you get a TMCC board in it, which is Lionel's system. Or if you buy 3-rail by Sunset, Golden Gate Depot, those guys, you get a TMCC board in it. MTH is totally proprietary though. You only can buy their boards from them if you're lucky enough. It's only in their engines. Their system is more like a DCC system, except that it comes down the hot rail like DCC, but it's coming over an AC signal, like Larry said. Where Lionel system, the signal comes through the ground rail and comes into the locomotive. But what happens is, even though those engines are running AC power, and they have for years, the circuitry ends up, when it goes into the engine, that AC ends up probably becoming DC with electronics in it. It's not. You're using the AC, the 18 volt AC, basically to get the power to the engine if it's 30 feet away from the power source. It goes in, it gets filtered to DC, the 18 volts AC gets filtered down probably to, you know, 18 DC or 15 DC, whatever it may be. And then the boards, then you control that motor or whatever. It's not like the olden days where it's going in and the motor's running, you're running an AC cam motor. You're not running AC, you're running a DC cam motor. So that AC power is getting filtered. So there is some cons and there's some pros to it, just like it would anything. So
let me ask you this: in regards to how did you guys get interested in? I mean, when you see guys doing model railroading, it's either N or HO, and N is coming back. N is coming up with with all the electronics that we have out there now. DCC and all this. It's starting to make a comeback. So how did you guys? What was your Larry? What was your interest in sticking with that? And after Larry answers, Chris, is the same question to you. What was the fascination?
Well, I started in HO actually. When I back in the 80s, I started in HO, and I went to O gauge because of all the accessories, the amount of space that was inside the cars and all that. You could really do a lot with the scale because it was scaled up. So what I actually did, the layout that's actually sitting behind me, you can't see it, is an HO it's an HO layout, and it's I scaled it up to an O gauge layout. It's I don't know if anybody's familiar with Atlas's book. The Granite Gorge in Northern was a layout in that book, and I took that layout and scaled it up to a 3-rail layout.
Nice.
Yeah, so I got the best of both worlds right now, so it's great.
And Chris, what was your introduction into the?
My introduction was the post-war trains that my father had. That was his uncles, so they were my great uncles that we had. My grandfather used to set them up for him as a kid. And then I had an HO set actually back in the late 80s. And then there were these big trains in the attic. And one year my dad set them up, and I got my first gist of O scale, and I dabbed in HO also in my life. But I like O scale. I like the size of it. I like the sounds of it. That's what I do O scale. It's not because I think anything else is ridiculous or anything like that. I respect everything. I also do narrow gauge O scale. That's become a fascination of mine in the last couple of years too, because that's a lot of fine scale details. I'm really into that side of things. So, I dab in that too. So, but the sheer size of this boxcar, look at this boxcar. I love it. I just love the size of it. I mean, like I said, the price point, yeah, you pay more money, but it's for what you like, and we all go down those different roads of scales, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. No, I think that's great. I just find it, I find it fascinating. I mean, like I said earlier in the show, when we first started, I was introduced to it as a kid. I remember my old man was setting it up outside he moved the dining room table, and you see my old man sweating, putting the tracks, up and the whole thing. And my cousin had this elaborate layout in his attic. And I remember them being so big, and I was like saying, man, these are really big. And so I find it, they're men trains.
Yeah.
But Dwight of Northern Star Railroad Lines, he said, I just remembered, Markland is also 3-rail, but the center is hidden.
Yeah, they use a stud system.
A what system?
Stud. So instead of having a third rail like we have, which is like another rail, they use what they call studs. So they're like a pin that gives you your hot, and they're spaced so far apart along the track.
Yeah, they're in the ties.
Yeah, and the engines have what they call a slot. Have like a slot, or I forget what the proper term is for it. that glides across those studs to pick up the hop, but it still gets its ground from the outside rail through the wheel. But the problem with that system is because I thought about doing there was a post on Facebook about doing a stud system on a 3-rail O scale American that the guy did. And what he did was he took his engines and he put the Markland slots on them because it hides the third rail using the stud system, Dwight said. So, but the problem with that is you get a lot of noise because that slider that goes around those studs, you hear the clunk, 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 clunk. So there's a kind of a downside to it because it's extra noise that you really don't want to hear on the layout, because you want to hear.
Yeah,
right. So but it's a very cool system that it really makes the third rail disappear. I know a lot of the guys around the YMTA bust my chops. They're already busting my chops just to pick on me about being an O scale 3-rail because it's not in the real world. You don't really have a third track. You don't have that third rail in the middle. So there's ways to hide it. You can paint it. I can't think of the paint name off the top of my head right now. But actually, like I was telling you guys before, I'm actually dual gauging some of my 3-rail tracks. So what that means is the middle hot rail is actually going to be pushed in a little bit to accommodate my if I do ON30 or ON3 narrow gauge, so that my ON3 or my ON30 can occupy the third rail track along with my standard gauge locomotives that run on AC power. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to run all my narrow gauge equipment on battery power. So they're totally isolated from the AC power. And they would not affect it because unlike the 2-rail world, like HON scale, O scale narrow gauge, all that stuff, you guys have to worry about reversing loops, all that, the frogs, everything. We really don't have to worry about that in 3-rail because the middle rail is always the hot. It's always hot. It's always live. And it doesn't matter if you have ground on both sides of that track. On the outside, the train will pick up ground on either side. So we never have to worry about having a reverse loop or anything like that. So that train could come in there, that narrow gauge train could come in there and sit there and put like a kitty on a battery. It'll never. I can bring a O scale steamer up and it'll never trip anything.
Oh, nice. Well, that's the advantage of the third rail then.
Yeah.
When I had the layout, not this layout, but when I had my first layout down in the basement, when you're talking about trimming out, it just reminded me. I had some visitors that come down. Well, I'm showing them the layout, and all of a sudden the trains died. Like trying to figure out, I had the toggle switches, going in. And turns out, the long and short of it, turns out the guy who was visiting, he was putting a quarter on the track. And he was shorting out the system. And he thought it was pretty funny. That's one thing you don't do, gentlemen. Someone invites you to your house. 2 rules. Keep your hands in your pocket and ask to see the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Just a little common sense is the thing. How Larry, what's the on the O scale? I'm sure it's the expense is a lot more than, for a boxcar. Chris touched on it.
Yeah, so the expense is a little bit more than HO. I've seen prices for used locomotives, diesel locomotives in O scale that are in 3-rail. We're talking about 3-rail scale that are about the same price as you'd pay for a brand new one in HO or even N.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen $350 for a used 3-rail O scale engine, conventional. This doesn't have command control or anything, and you can get the same type of locomotive in HO or N for about the same money.
Now, if you were to purchase a brand new one, what would with the command control and how much would one of those cost you with diesel?
You're looking at anywhere from $350 to $500.
Right.
Ooh. Hey, we wanted this before we start. Just Andrew Gilmore from down under in Australia just came in. and he said he just got home today after minor. I don't know how minor heart surgery is. Minor. If anytime you're touching the heart, I don't think that's minor.
I was going to ask if there is such a thing as minor heart surgery.
Is that like almost being pregnant? I don't know. I don't know. But Andrew, it's good to see you, brother. It's good to see you. I'm glad everything went well. Our prayers are with you. Glad you're here. Glad you're another day above ground, my friend. Another day above ground. Here we got a third rail. This guy's name is Third Rail. He says, "Oh man, I'm late to the O show." Late to the O show. Well, welcome aboard, Third Rail. We were just talking about what are we talking about?
Just old scale.
Just old scale, right? I got it. Sometimes I haven't seen you.
We're just
just shooting the breeze here. A couple of guys hanging out.
Right.
A couple of adult beverages,
A couple two tree.
Yeah. Andrew Gilmore says it was done via pinhole surgery. Okay. Well, we're glad you're alive and glad you're here with us and speaking. Join in. That was good. Good to have you around. So, saying that, what's that? John wants to know, Andrew, if we can call you Pinhead now.
I thought we already were. But okay.
Oh.
Anyways.
Anyway, we digress. Good to have you back, Andy.
Yeah, so
you're saying that it's about top of the line, bells and whistles, anyway, $350 to $500.
Yeah, for a diesel, the steam engines have out of this world. They're out to the moon right now. They're anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000.
Well, yeah, depending on what you get, it's either between. I honestly the price ranges from $8,000 to $2,000 on a steamer, depending on what you buy.
Now, as far as detail on these engines go, how detailed are they, especially on steam? Because I know a lot of guys who go into the big stuff, they like it because of the steam engine. Am I correct? I mean.
Mm-hmm.
This is really like manly man toys here. Like, oh,
we're not HO anymore.
We're Lionel, We're real men. Okay, John's going to sleep now.
Oh, you woke up. Anyways, the detail on the steamers is pretty detailed.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's you get all your whistle levers, your bells, that stuff. You get synchronized smoke, a lit firebox, all that stuff. I have engines that have blowdown on them, so they send me with the blowdown effect. From the cylinders. So yeah, you can get a pretty detailed steamer. Either what side of the fence you buy from, either Lionel or MTH, which are the two big names. That's why I keep using them, because Atlas doesn't really make steam engines in O scale. They're predominantly a diesel and freight car manufacturer. Three rail by Sunset is more of a brass type third rail locomotive, where it's a more higher end. You're getting more detail. But a lot of guys really buy that if they're looking for that that one engine that they have to have, and they want it prototypical. They want it detailed out the wazoo, everything. So predominantly when you're buying steam, you're buying either Lion or MTH. So
well, I know MTH and I makes the big subway cars, the transit authority.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy in Florida that Big Daddy is called. I should have given a heads up and told him to watch this. He does the subway, MTH, the big O-scale subway cars. He has literally every line, at least 4.
Wow.
The A, all the way, all the IND, the BMT, and I think he's working on whatever the IRT when it comes out. That's it. And he runs them. and he runs them. He loves them. He loves them. So, Cloverdale, my man Marcel, how prototypical are they? And thanks for stealing my question, Bill. How prototypical are they, Larry?
Well, the so the 3-rail engines, they don't have fixed pilots. Chris touched on about the couplers. They call the line-out claw. That's what I've heard them called as. So they're not prototypical either. Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Hold it sideways.
I'll give you a better analogy. I'll give you a better analogy. Hold on. Stop yelling at me.
Okay. I'm sorry. So you were saying, Larry?
So see the gap?
Yeah, there's the gap. Right. So that's not prototypical at all. Yeah, there we go. And then the wheels, the flanges are really huge on them. They're referred to as pizza cutters. So, but it's they have their drawbacks for if you want real prototypical rolling stock.
Right. How important is it for you guys? I mean, since you both on your layouts, how important is it to run prototypical? I mean, is it paramount that everything is, oh my goodness, if that rivets, I mean.
No, it's not paramount for me because I don't get for me, the hobby is about having fun, teaching my kids carpentry and electrical and electronics and the more the building side of it. I could care less if they never are 30 some years old and play with trains still, okay?
Right.
That's what it is for me. I don't get hell bent out of shape about anything because of the fact that, like I said, I do it for a hobby. If I'm going to get bent out of shape about something, I'll go back to the real world and, deal with stresses there. This, like I said, this is a hobby. This is for me to enjoy, for me and my kids and bond and, whatever. So no, I don't get. Do I like the detailed stuff? Absolutely, but I'm not going to care if one rivet's missing or two rivets are missing.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. When I first met, no, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, for me, it's not about running prototypically or anything like that. It's more because I have a lot of the Lionel accessories on my layout, but I'm also scenicking the layout as not as in a Lionel layout, but more of something that would be done in HO or even N. So it's kind of a mixture between trying to blending in the 3-rail accessories into something that's a little bit more believable, but not really realistic or even very detailed. It's just more of blending everything together.
Mm.
See, my layout will be detailed, like Larry said. I'm actually going to probably do all Katie couplers on my cars, even though I just said I don't care about the and I say that in terms of engines because everybody and their brother, like a steam engine will come out and it'll miss one little detail and they get all bent out of shape about it. And I guess they can argue that, well, they paid this much money for it, they want it right. My side of the fence is I bought it, I like it, I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to use it. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I think that's in every hobby. I mean, if you go to the movies, the X-Men Affinity Wars and Star Wars, everybody's online talking about how they should have did this and should have did that. Mm-hmm. And next sequel that's coming out, so it's the same. Basically, any hobby you're into or anything, any genre you're doing. JT1 says, I'm glad I do HO. And then he said, I also own MTH and HO scale.
Mm-hmm.
Dwight of Northern Star Railroad. Hey, Dwight. Are the couplers body mounted?
No, they're mounted to the trucks.
Yeah, they're Togo.
Okay. And 3-rail says 3-rail is more relaxed than the other scales.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That depends on where you hang out on the internet because if you go on the OG,
I'm running that in my head. I think any hobby you do is relaxed if you
Yeah, well, if you a lot of the HO or N scalers, they go on trainboard.com or Model Railroad Hobbyist. I tend to learn a lot from the other scales too. I get Model Railroad Craftsman as a subscription. I'm the type of guy who does O scale, but I try to take, stuff that I can from other scales and apply it to a bigger scale. Okay.
Right.
Well, we have a thing, the old gauge Model Railroading magazine. They have one of the most popular forums on the internet for O gauge, which is the O gauge forum. So I see a lot of the activity there is what I'm talking about in terms of O scale, about prototypical, because a lot of guys get bent out of shape. I just go on my merry way. I do what I want.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
What's this? Dave Piper. Hello, Dave. He wants to know, which third rail track do you guys like best?
Atlas.
Gargraves, and I like raw switches.
What's the difference?
There's no difference. This is what you prefer.
Right.
Atlas makes a higher end 3-rail track for high rail scale. Eric Strains, everybody probably knows Eric Strains on YouTube. He uses a lot of Atlas. He's switching, he uses a lot of Atlas switches or turnouts, depending what scale you're in. Where he's now switching to Ross switches. Ross are more of the most popular switch turnouts in 3-rail O scale. What's nice about Gargraves is you can get flex track. So you can do flex track like you do in HO. Miraculously, the hard thing about a 3-rail is when you want to hand lay. And trust me, I'm going down that road and I'm finding that it's a very difficult task to hand lay 3-rail O scale track. And it's not the curves or the straights, it's actually the turnouts, because the frogs, they don't follow NMRA standards. So you have to get the frog right so that all your different equipment from different manufacturers don't derail, because they all have different trucks on them.
Right.
Right.
And Steve Ross is the only one who really figured it out in terms of, because that's what he did. Before he built turnouts back in the 70s, or the 80s, whatever it was, for people. And that's how he got his business. That's how he came up with raw switches. So he was basically hand laying turnouts, and they still hand laying in his factory. He manufactures everything in the United States. So he's got like girls in the warehouse, making turnouts for him. But they're great. They come with wooden ties. You can get a yard switch from him that's probably about that big, number 8, that big, long, huge. But you're gonna pay money for it. But it's basically a preference or what you're looking for. Really, there's really no better. I'm not saying what I mentioned to what Larry mentions is any better. It's just what you want to do to your layout and how you want to do it is basically how I'm coming across with mine.
So for me it was more. I had the plans from the HO book that I wanted to scale up into O, and really that was an Atlas. That is an Atlas book, and the Atlas track and O match the same geometry as it does in HO. So I went with that, and it worked out great.
When I met Larry, I want to get into the next segment of this. Is Larry, you did an aquarium car.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with the slides. So the first slide here is the Lionel Lines aquarium car. And it's basically what Lionel did way back in the 50s is they had an aquarium car with fish going around.
Do you have that? Excuse me, Larry. Do you have that on screen share, or John? Are you doing that on screen share?
John.
Okay.
Yeah. So Lionel had that the fish going around, and then they came out in the 90s. I think it was the 90s. a train going around inside instead of the fish, which I thought was really cool. I was like, hey, that's, you know, a train going around inside a boxcar with a train going around the layout. That's great. So I went ahead and got it, and it took a few more years, and I was thinking about what can I do with this boxcar. What are some of the things I can do? So next slide. So this is the interior of the aquarium car, I should say, not boxcar, aquarium car. It basically consists of a few diodes to bring the AC down to DC voltage, capacitor to smooth out the DC ripple, and then a couple voltage regulators to regulate it down to 9 volts for the motor, and then one for the lights that are inside the car. So that's what I started with. So the next slide. So what I decided to do was use the Rail Pro HO decoder, because Rail Pro does not rely on DCC through the rails. It's all over the air. And I thought this might be an interesting project to see if I could have this run this train around inside the car with some sound and maybe some lights, and, you know, see what happens. So here's my first attempt at it. If we go to the next slide, you'll see I have it. Yep. So you'll see that I have the decoder, and I used a sugar cube speaker. Just put some foam tape on it. So, and then had that attached to the decoder and just stuffed the decoder inside. We go to the next slide. Actually, sorry, mounted the decoder to the top of the car, and you can see there's a good close-up picture of it. We go to the next slide. What I discovered was the 9-volt regulator was getting way too hot for this decoder. It was underpowered, and I decided to upgrade that to a 12-volt decoder. And this is the circuit that I have that brings the AC voltage down to the DC. There's a lot of heat that comes off that voltage regulator, so there's a lot of load that the decoder is pulling off of the off the AC to DC. That's mounted underneath the car. That's a picture of the underside of the car, which helps with keeping it cool. Next slide. And there's a picture of. Well, go ahead.
Did you ever think about that? It looks like a moss you got sitting there. I'm assuming that's your regulator. Is about putting a heat? Oh, you have the heat sink there. Never mind. You already have a heat sink there. I didn't. I'm so used to seeing the little silver ones. I just go.
No, it's a big one.
Yeah.
And it still gets warm too. So, so this slide here, slide 7. So that's a picture of the capacitor. And if I had to do this all over again, which I may tear it apart and redo it. But this is I'd rather go with a coaxial capacitor, because that capacitor is a little too close to the rail in my comfort level. So, but it works great. It actually, I have it here. I could probably do a demo if I could swing the camera around and
sure
show you guys. All right, let me just get things set up here. So what I did with the controller is I actually Rail Pro offers a it's like a USB module that instead of getting the handheld remote, you can get a USB module and run their program off your laptop. That's what I got to control it. All right, so let me swing the camera around. How's that look?
Centered, good.
All right. Start the sound. Lights. So I got 2 LEDs in there. One for the front headlight off the decoder and one for the back headlight off the decoder. So I don't know if you can hear it, but I got the sound, the engine sound. Let's start the whistle. There we go. Got it?
Yeah.
Now you ring the bell. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, thanks.
It is. Third Rail says, that's awesome. Dwight of Northern Star. That's cool, brother. That's cool.
Thanks.
Dwight says, man, look at the size of those speakers.
So Larry, you're getting a lot of heat. You're getting a lot of heat going from 18 AC down to the 12 volt DC voltage, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I actually had to use a so I have a voltage divider that divides the voltage, and then on the one side of the divider, I actually had to put a current divider in there, so it kind of split up the current because it was burning up a resistor. So.
Huh. And the reason why I asked that question is because actually, like I was mentioning before about the battery operating stuff and my narrow gauge stuff, the board that's actually I'm designing my own board that's going to get the DCC signal into the locomotive through Wi-Fi into the engine, so that I can still use like an ESU decoder.
Okay.
Okay. So. But what I want to accomplish is with my battery packs is I want to be able to charge from the rails. So when my narrow gauge engine is sitting in the roundhouse, it's going to pick that. In that situation, it's DC. But I was like, well, what happens if you bring up a valid point for my design? Because I was like, well, why can't I bring the AC in too, if I wanted to, like the 18 volts, and filter it down to 15 volts, or not to charge the battery, but you filter it down to the 3.34 volts that you need to charge a light bulb battery. But you're right, you're going to get a lot of heat from that energy dissipation.
Yeah, because 18 volts AC kind of works out to somewhere around 30 volts DC, about, give or take.
Because of RMS.
You're right, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, now that you've moved into this new house of yours, which, by the way, congratulations on this.
Thank you.
And are we planning on building a...
Yeah, we're planning over my head, as I always do, because I'm an engineer by trade. So I go big or go home. Yeah, so basically, I don't really have a final design. Robert Hallman and I were working on a design, in the Hangouts. There's multiple versions of it. It's actually going to be a 3-deck layout. The top third deck would be narrow gauge. Standard gauge will go up to that level too. And then the most of the second and first levels will be just standard gauge O gauge. Unfortunately, I'm only going to be able to do 1/4 of my basement now. So basically, I'm going to kind of apply the Toma effect from Model Railroad Hobbyist, so that start small.
Build as you go.
Yeah, build as I go. But I was thinking if I can get away with it, if I get my third deck right, I can actually bring the narrow gauge line in here and kind of make it almost like a ceiling type layout up in here, just to kind of build modules, putz around with the boys around here. I have a workstation right here now on my countertop that I use behind my desk, and I'm going to do my electronic, because I do a lot of electronic work too. So, I could do my electronics work and my modeling and stuff like that. So we'll see where it goes. Eventually, I'd like most of my basement to be my layout. Besides past this wall would stay where my shop is. Have my woodworking shop in there, and my 3D printer when I get my 3D printer and stuff like that. all my other boy toys I can keep in the shop to support the layout, you know, and do other things. But,
Do you have a plan set up for this?
Someone I can show you, kind of. It's kind of not a big final piece to the puzzle, I guess you can say. So I'm from the northeastern part of Pennsylvania. Probably a lot of people heard of the city of Scranton, which was on the show The Office.
Yes.
And in Scranton, so my layout is basically a freelance version of where I live. I'm doing what I want. I'm taking bits and pieces from my area and applying it to the layout. So here, as you can see, where the turntable, this is a turntable right in here. This is what they call Steamtown, but it's a freelance version of Steamtown. Steamtown's a real place in Scranton, Pennsylvania, that's ran by the United States Park Service.
I've been there.
Yeah, you've been there. So I have several engines in O scale that are part of Steamtown's collection. One being the 4012 Union Pacific Big Boy. I'm getting the 759 Burke that's there. So I have some engines that will be on the layout permanently as part of this area. So the whole premise of this area is that it's going to be a museum excursion service area. So I can, run steam and diesel on my modern era layout. Back here, there's actually going to be the Steamtown Mall, which is going to be a big backdrop, which I'm stealing Miles' idea and using how he does his buildings for that. And there's actually going to be a real catwalk that comes out over these tracks eventually. That's there in the real world. So behind this wall, if you call north where my stairs are, south of that, on this plan, it shows the diesel facility for the modern era, big yard, that kind of thing. Actually, this is now the steel mill. I'm putting in a steel mill on my layout to operate, and that diesel facility is actually going down to the bottom deck. If we go back, you're going northeast through the layout, you're going to come through this bend here, and then there'll probably be an industry somewhere in here, coming down here, and then the rail. It looks like a big loop, but actually this is going to eventually be an operating layout. But like I mentioned before the show, it's also designed so if my kids come home from school in the winter and they want to just go down and run trains, 3 decks, 1 deck, whatever, they can do it. So I have a helix in here that goes down to my lower deck, and let's see if I can pull the lower deck up quick here. Hide that. Lower deck. Yeah, there's not really much on the lower deck right now, but on this plan, like I said, I have so many variations of this that's not even done. So the premise of it is that you leave Scranton and you go up the valley. We live in a valley. So you're going to go to Carbondale, Owensdale, that way. And the trains are basically going to come in. The modern trains are going to come in from the shop, which will have staging. So they're officially coming from Harrisburg. I'm pretty much running my main line is Norfolk Southern. And I'll have a couple of short lines of the D&H. I bring it back. My father worked for the D&H, so I'm going to keep the D&H alive. The Erie Lackawanna, which is now the Delaware Lackawanna that still runs today. So there will be my short lines to service some facilities on the layout. And then, so they'll come out of staging, come in here, come into Scranton, do some intermodal work. My kid wants an Army depot on the layout, so I'm putting an Army depot in for him that we can bring in tanks and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting layout if I ever complete it.
White of Northern Star Railroad lines is operations difficult with 3 rail or /O scale?
No, operations is operations.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what scale you're in. It's just how you design the layout. All those same principles apply. You know, like the facilities. Do you have everything the facility needs to operate the facility? It's not just about the trains; it's about the industry that you're serving too. Whether you're serving a steel mill or whatever.
TNS Shortline fan. Hey guys, been a long time since I've been in here. Welcome back. Good to see you, Shortline fan. And Dave Piper wants to know, what's the minimum radius that you run?
On this layout, the minimum radius is an 072, which is about six feet of curve.
How big?
6 feet diameter. So it's 72 inches.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I run 54-inch diameter.
Yeah. And that's pretty much common as a 54 in that range, 36. But yeah, this is 72, and there's turnout, there's curves in this that are even bigger than that. My helix is about 10 foot in diameter.
I'm looking at my 21.5-inch radius.
Yeah. And my narrow gauge would be about a 36-inch radius.
You're
27.
right out here. I would be sitting like this.
Yeah. You look good that way, Bill.
Wow. I know just to give you a heads up, I know I'm a lot better because I don't rock this way anymore. Rock. Doctor said I'm all better. I have an earlier question from Andy Crawford, and he said, would you say it's just the trucks that are the problem? Wouldn't new couplers and trucks sort this? A lot of the two-rail guys use Lionel bodies. The sticklers even like the modern third-rail equipment.
Probably. I would have to get back to Andy on that one. See, handling in three-rail is not a very popular thing. Most people who are sane, and I'm not sane by any means, just buy turnouts and buy track and we'll put it down and wire it up and go. When you're building a layout of that size, if I told you probably how much those switches, all the turnouts in that layout would cost, you'd be on the floor having a heart attack. So that's where the handling comes in, because handling is a lot cheaper. I mean, it takes more time, obviously, but as you get good at it, it goes faster. So, you know, I came across a guy who builds layouts for a living. He has hand-laid three-rail tracks. I've talked to him, and basically what he's told me is that you have to watch, you know, certain areas because of the trucks. If you don't change all those trucks out, it may work where if the two-rail guys are getting away with the you know, using Lionel three-rail trucks, it might work. The only question that I have is the engines. How are the engines affected in that? By, you know, handling to a two-rail frog or a two-way turnout. You know what I mean? I don't know how that affects them in terms of their wheel sets. Yeah. I'd have to kind of research that a little more. So Andy just likes to put me on the spot. That's all. It makes me think about things. That's all that comes down to.
Well, Andy says same. Is that a requirement for this hobby? I might have missed the memo on that.
No, it's not. I'm just saying. I'm just pointing so people who don't know me know I'm not. I'm insane. I'm not sane.
So you're the guy who puts fun back in dysfunction?
Pretty much.
Third rail. Is it the curves that dictate the truck's coupler situation, Larry, you think?
No, it's not. It's the cars can handle curves. Well, I should preface that. So most cars can handle curves down to a 36-inch diameter. The longer wheelbase is the longer cars that you have, then you need like a 45-inch diameter or up to 72 diameter. So it really, if we're talking about a 40-foot boxcar, that will go around a 36-inch diameter curve easily.
Predominantly, what governs your radii is, or your curve is your engines, because if you're running big steam like a 4884 or whatever, that needs a minimum of an 0782 curve to not derail.
Yeah, I can't run C1C trucks, diesel locomotives on my layout because of the curves, and there's some close clearance issues I have with it. So it's only BB trucks that I can run. The locomotives with BB trucks. So
Andy Crawford says, "True. Good to be able to give it back for once." I emphasize the for once.
Yeah, don't let him fool you, folks. He always gives it back.
Jamestown 34. It may not be necessary to be crazy to do this hobby, but it is helpful. Have you guys ever done this? Have you guys ever like start, somebody asks or the conversation comes up and you get so enthralled with your hobby that you start talking about it in depth. Then you happen to look up and notice that there's a glaze over the person's eyes that you're talking about.
All the time.
Yeah, that's what happens to my wife when me and her talk about it. When she says, "So how's everything going in the layout room?" And I'm like, "Well, I had this situation with the switch, and I had to, take the grinding tool out and cut through the frog a little bit." But then I look over, and she's like, she's doing this. Like when I'm in this middle of this discussion, she's taking out the bullets. She goes like this.
Yeah,
like,
so
all right, if you don't want to hear it, just tell me you don't want to.
Yeah, so I'm doing a project on my back patio. I'm putting LED strips on my back patio, and they're going to be hooked to my home automation system. And when I got back in the hobby, I ended up learning all this electronic stuff and became an electronics geek that I never knew before. Blah 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 blah. So I designed my own little circuit board, and I had it printed. And I'm upstairs telling my wife, "Hey, look at this, look at it," and she's looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" So I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's that.
I told my wife one night that I was casting rocks on the layout, and she's like, "You're what?"
You're casting. It's called an arts and crafts, honey.
Right.
I used to do it in kindergarten, and I got really good at it. And now,
you know how you crochet? This is my crocheting.
Right.
I used to remember. I don't know if they still sell it, but my layout downstairs. I wanted. I'm still on a budget. But when I was back then, I would go to the local hobby store out here, and the guy would sell the rock castings, molded rock casting, and they'd be like a lot of money, and you wouldn't get what you really wanted. So the guy tells me one day, he says, "You can make your own rock casting." I said, "I can. How?" He says, "With this bottle and medical gauze. Go to the drugstore and buy a big thing of medical gauze." I said, "Well, what do you do?" He says, "Well, you clean the rock. You find the rock that you like, clean it off, water, let it dry, and then paint this stuff on it, and then put the first layer." And so I'm out in the backyard because we got these little boulders out there. And my wife says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm making molds." And she's like, "Well, are you out of your mind?" I said, No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. But hey, what we do for our hobby, right?
Right.
Dave Piper wants to know roughly $100 per remote turnout, correct?
I can get them used for about, so Atlas. So Atlas, I can get them used for, it was around $40, $50 a piece. And as long as they had good pictures, that was showing the switch okay. So new, you're talking 100, 120.
And Dwight says, yes, the wives do space out, but then they say you never talk to me. Wait a minute. I wear the pants. I'm like,
Bill, you know record this, right?
Oh, it is? Like that, babe. This guy's made me say that because, I'm with that. That's it.
We'll cut that out.
We'll cut that in the editing room.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's broke.
Oh, MHB Pondak, I hope I'm not pronouncing that wrong, says, or they ask, why do you need such a big layout? Yep, 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 yep. We could do a show just on that. I'm thinking about doing that. Ron Bryce.
We're boys that never grew up. That's why.
Oh, Ron Bryce from down under in Australia, my good friend, says, I like how Bill checked the background first to see if his wife was coming. Wait till you guys have been married 50 plus years. I'm rolling up on that 45 there, Dwight, so I know exactly. Now, let me ask you guys two guys a question before we close out here. Do you both have YouTube channels?
Not
Yeah,
yet.
I do. Yeah.
You do, Larry. What is the name of your YouTube channel?
Name of it? That's a good question. I think if you just Google my name on there, or search my name, you'll find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Check out Larry. Check out Larry Ryan's YouTube channel. Give him a lot of love. How many subscribers you got?
3.
3. Let's see if we can build that to 6, guys. Come on.
So what are you making, about $500 a month on that?
About.
Or was it 5?
Yeah.
Oh, the MHP says, my name's Matt, and the wife calls them toys. Yes, that I hear you. You guys, I'm doing a selfless plug here. If you guys go to my YouTube channel, the South Brooklyn Railroad, and scroll down, and you'll see the art of negotiation with your wife. Check that out. I all the men out there, that's a helpful. The art of negotiation. It's how you can gain more real estate from the superintendent. Ron's Trains and Things. Do you have a YouTube channel? I don't know. What is it called? I don't know. Okay. Anyway, let's see. Dwight of Northern just want to thank the presenters tonight and Bill, and especially the guy in the back running it all. That would be you, Johnny, director extraordinaire. Well, one more question here we got. Dave Piper says, is Atlas, Gargraves, Ross all interchangeable, or do you have to stick with one brand?
Nope, they're all interchangeable.
Yeah, they're all interchangeable.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's good. Listen, I want to thank you guys for being on Who's Big Bill Talking to this week, and really appreciate it. And it was very insightful and very informative. And stuff like that. I got an education tonight. I learned a little something about, third rail and old scale. It was pretty good. Thank you very much. Just to give you guys a heads up out there, June 28th, that's this Thursday at 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Johnny's Train Talk Show comes back, and John will have a plethora of guests. That would be you guys out there if you want to get on and talk trains and the hobby and hopefully some O-scale stuff and stuff like that. And just come on by. It's this Thursday night. It's Johnny's Train Talk Show. And Johnny talks trains, and you guys can get together and shoot the breeze. And he'll pick the topic, or you pick the topic, and then you just go from there. So I hope you guys tune in this Thursday, June 28th. Next month, July, we got a chock full of things. As you guys know, Joe Desmond is taking off July and August, so we'll see him back in September. But we're still going to be doing Who's Big Bill Talking to in July, and our guest will be Ron Pierre from Canada. And fine scale modeling will also be. What date is that, John? Oh, we didn't schedule it yet. So we have fine scale modeling, which we didn't schedule for a date yet. We also have Johnny's Train Talks thing on every Thursday at 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I think July 18th, that's when we'll do the next Who's Big Bill Talking to. Just to give you guys a heads up on this Who's Big Bill Talking to. It's not going to be a standard like it was with the live show last year or the previous time where we had it regular on Saturday. It's going to be when I can get, a guest and basically if I just feel like doing it. So that's what it really boils down to. But that's that from this end. Thank you for tuning in to the YouTube Model Builders Who's Big Bill talking to again. Thank you, Larry Ryan, and thank you very much, Chris Rood, for being a part of this show. Getting a lot of feedback from Ian. They can't wait to see the chat on trolleys from Mike Slater and stuff like that. Everybody was pretty happy with this. So thank you guys very much for being for showing off your stuff and sharing it with us. And just one more thing before you go, YouTube Model Builders is now going to start manufacturing. You see the sheet behind Larry? We're going to do the YouTube Model Builders similar to Johnny's sheet behind him.
Nice smell accents too.
We're going to sell them for $19.95 plus shipping and handling. And if you order two, we'll throw in a pack of cigarettes.
It's a great way to hide the layout when you're online.
What's that?
It's a great way to hide the layout when you're online.
Yes. We spend no expense here, and you guys, and for an extra $5, we'll spray paint YouTube Model Builders. That 6 spray paint where it's like running down like crazy, serial killer type thing.
Hey,
anyway,
Bill.
Yeah.
After we're done producing that, we can make YMTMB bed sheets too.
Don't get me started.
King size, queen.
Ooh.
Used to.
Yeah,
Bill,
I gotta go.
I'll make you money. I'll make you money.
Let's go. We're gonna go. We're getting off rail. We're getting off rail here. Literally, figuratively, and spiritually, we're getting off rail here. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in out there, because without you, we don't have a show. And we'll catch you later. Take care. God bless, and we'll see you guys on the radio.